everyone, Cleo here, welcome to my channel. Today I'll be wrapping up the month of October. Now I changed my setting a bit for this video, but it's just for this video because I'm filming this at my not normal time. So I'm filming this on the 31st of October and the video is supposed to go up tomorrow. This means that I had to shoot after work and then all of the natural light is gone from my apartment and I have to use this lamp that is only covering me when I'm sitting right here and not where I'm normally sitting. Now the month of October has not really treated me very nicely and I hope the month of November will be a lot better for me. All in all, I finished 3 books. I'm still quite happy considering the fact that close to 2 weeks out of the month of October I wasn't even able, I didn't get any reading done in close to 2 weeks. Now part of this is physical, so one week I was having a cold and whenever I would try to read something it would take me like 3 pages before I would feel like I was falling asleep. So in that week I could almost get nothing done, and then sadly my cat went missing about a week and a half ago now. And so the first week that she was missing I mentally couldn't focus on anything, and in the evenings I would just want to go to sleep in the hope that when I woke up she would be there again. I'm still hoping for her to show up, so I hope in the month of November I'll have some good news on that front, but as of now she still hasn't returned. This means that so close to 2 weeks out of this month I wasn't able to read anything, and which means that I only got to the 3 books that I was planning to get to. I had hoped to be able to add a 4th book to it, but it just didn't happen. But all in all, if I count these 3 books, I still got to 1,522 pages, which is still pretty okay for me, so I'm still very happy with this month. I have a more in-depth review for one of these already prepared, and I am thinking of doing perhaps another in-depth review of one of the other books that I just finished like an hour ago. Yes, this is how closely timed this wrap-up is. But I will already give you my initial thoughts on all 3 of these books, and maybe you will see some more videos about them later. Now the first book that I finished this month is a book that I wasn't too happy about when I finished it. Actually halfway through I was already feeling like, what am I reading, why am I reading this? Which is not to say that the experience of reading it wasn't in a way pleasant. Actually the book really read like, I flew through it. Flew through it is saying a lot. It still took me 2 weeks to finish it, but it is also a 700+ page book. But I really always wanted to continue, wanted to know how is the story going to develop from here. So I got in this like really weird zone in which you're like, I want to continue, but I'm so annoyed whenever I'm reading it. And the book I'm talking about, maybe I should mention that as well, is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. Now this book has very mixed reviews, like you either hate it or love it, it seems, and I'm definitely on the hate side of it. This was actually a reread for me, so I read it at some point after a friend of mine recommended it to me, and then I don't really remember what my thoughts were on it at the time. My review for it was relatively okay actually, but I also never started on the 2nd or 3rd book, which I actually also have on my shelves. So there was something that it didn't really grasp my attention in any case. It is often described as being a Twilight for academics because the story is about a witch who is she is working in Oxford. She is trying to get a professor position at Oxford. She already has one at Yale, and while she's there she discovers a manuscript, and some weird stuff happens when she opens this manuscript, so she decides to return it to the library. But word gets out that she somehow summoned this book, which apparently hasn't been available for checkout in like centuries, and so all manners of different creatures start to notice her, and so she gets into sort of like tense situation, and in that situation she meets a vampire by name, so her name is Diana, by the way. And so she meets this vampire called Matthew, and he's sort of protective of her, but because he wants the manuscript very badly. But as you can imagine, since we're calling it Twilight for Academics, a romance ensues. And basically the best part of the book is the part before there is romance. Because the moment romance is introduced into the novel, it just gets cringeworthy for me, at least. I mean, it was so corny, and all of the interesting parts were really like the tension between the two of them, in which you have this independent woman, this modern day independent woman, versus this ancient vampire with his old his old way of thinking and his old way of acting and protectiveness, and the whole pack mentality and things like that. And yeah, as of then, I just felt like, sure, it could have been super interesting, you know, to contrast these things, but I just felt like the author took more of a direction towards like, yeah, the vampire way of thinking is the correct way, which as a feminist I'm not entirely agreeing with. But so in any case, my full review of this will be up soon. It will not be spoiler free. I hope it is somewhat brand free. I think I contained myself pretty decently in that review. But in any case, I gave this 1 star. I'm still debating getting to the second one, but honestly, it was such a frustrating experience for me to read this book, so I don't think so. The second book that I got to, which is actually just like almost a week ago that I started it, is also a reread for me, so yeah, 2 rereads, but okay. And that is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, this time in Spanish. I have already read it once in Spanish, but rereading it in Spanish as well. I've reread it mostly in English. Now, The Prisoner of Azkaban is one of my favorite Harry Potter books, and this hasn't changed, though I have noticed that maybe because of this channel I'm like examining it more thoroughly when I reread it, and there were certain things about it that I noticed now that I didn't notice at the beginning. For example, some problems with the time turner thing, which, I mean, I understand the problem there, and I'm not saying that it's something that the author should have changed or anything. It would have just confused things to no end, but it's something that I noticed, whereas in previous rereads of this I would have never noticed it. Also, by the way, this review is going to contain spoilers, because I'm assuming everybody's read Harry Potter. If not, skip ahead like 4 minutes. So what I also very much noticed in this book that I had never noticed before when I reread it is how many similarities, or actually not really similarities, but how like the parallel between Harry and Neville is really drawn here at times, you know. You're not aware yet of the whole Harry Potter Neville back elements, but Harry pretends to be Neville at the beginning of the book, and then Harry has a dream in which he's replaced by Neville at some point, which is just interesting to reread in hindsight when you know the connection that the two characters actually have. Furthermore, I just think this is one of the most interesting books in the Harry Potter series, just because it tackles more deep elements of the story, like the betrayal of Harry's father, of Harry's parents, and the consequences it had for his life. It also introduces these, to me, the most interesting characters almost of the book, the Dementors. I find this is such an incredible element that J.K. Rowling introduced. I just think it has such a magic about this book. It's like the first book in which we're going more to the dark side of the storyline. And yeah, sure, you can say there are a lot of things happening in here that are just like coincidentally they are in like the one compartment in the train in which a teacher is, so that when Dementors come into their compartment, they are saved by their professor. Sure, but that's storytelling, you know. I know people have problems with these types of elements sometimes in Harry Potter books, but I don't necessarily feel that way. They were still like children's stories, still a story at least that you construct in a certain way. So I don't necessarily feel that everything needs to be like, yeah, this is logical that it happens for this or that, or that we need to deconstruct every story and say why would this or that happen. You know, it is the story, and okay, certainly when things are extremely obviously just there for the story, when you're like, oh, what does this element do there? Like a Deus Ex Machina is something totally different. But I feel like in Harry Potter it's normal story construction. I also really love the character of Lupin, and on rereading this it becomes even more clear how weird the relationship between Harry and Sirius is. It's not that clear to, I mean, at least it wasn't that clear to me as a reader at the time, that the relationship between Sirius and Harry was a bit wrong from the get-go. I mean, in 1 hour he goes from I want to kill him because he betrayed my parents to yeah, sure, I want to live with you. This is rectified in later books in which the relationship between Harry and Sirius is taken more into question. You're given more of a perspective of maybe this is not the most healthy relationship out there. But so yeah, I still love this book upon rereading it. And out of the 3 that I've reread so far, this is definitely the best one. I am planning to put like more of a structure in my rereading of Harry Potter, but I will probably get to 2 of them in 2019 and then the final 2 in 2020. And I'll be super happy to be able to re-rank the Harry Potter books, because in all honesty I've reread certain books more than others, and the 6th book, for example, I don't think I've reread in its entirety ever. And possibly also not that many parts of it neither, because it is my least favorite Harry Potter book. But so I'm actually most anxious to get to that one at this time, but I just don't think it's a good idea to put too many Harry Potters in my 2019 CBR, because yeah, they are a lot thicker as they progress, and so I either want to get to 2 or like 4. I don't want to be able to like be doing like 3 next year and then 1 in the final year. I don't know why, that's just my weird brain, I guess. But so yeah, this is a 4-star read for me. I do think that there are, it's not the best Harry Potter for me, so I'm not going to give it 5 stars just because of that, and then also just because yeah, there are certain flaws in the book. I think all Harry Potters will probably have a certain flaw, but still some of them will be given a 5-star by me. And then the final book that I finished is a book that I absolutely had to finish, though in the end I didn't, because it was for our book club and our book club meeting got postponed. So actually I don't actually know by when I need to finish it, but I finished it today, 1 hour ago. And that is The Master and Margarita by Mikhael Bulgakov. Now this one is a difficult one for me to rank. I just finished my Goodreads review and I'm already thinking about wanting to change the stars. So I gave it 3 stars there, but it should definitely be a 3.5 at least. But I am considering changing it to a 4-star read. And I mean, my opinion on it might change throughout the coming days as I reflect more upon what I just finished reading. Now, this is not a book that is easy to recommend to people. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it, but it is special, and I think almost everybody in book club is really not looking forward to reading it or is struggling getting through it. But I thought it was really easy to get through actually for me. I really love the writing style, but I will admit that plot-wise it's not an easy book to get through. And the reason why I want to up the star rate that I give this book is mainly because of the things that I discovered in the books, the meaning behind what I've read that I've given to the story at least. So yeah, it's very much like an after experience that makes me want to give this more stars than I've currently given. But so the story of The Master and Margarita is, well, I'm gonna give it to you as if it's like super clear, but it's actually not super clear. But we are following 2 characters, the Master and Margarita. So the book is actually divided in 2 parts. The first part, in the first part we're introduced to the Master. In the second part we're also introduced to Margarita. And so the Master and Margarita are like a couple. Well, there's a couple, but actually Margarita has a husband, so it's actually an affair. And the Master is a writer, and he writes a story about like a sort of reimagining of the Jesus tale, but like mostly then the crucifixion and the decision of Pontius Pilate to have Jesus crucified. and he just becomes obsessed with the story, but also depressed by the criticism he gets for his reimagining of this story, and he at some point burns the manuscript and disappears from Margarita's life. And so at the beginning of the story, this is where we are. We don't know these characters yet. I think the master gets introduced like, I don't know, 100 pages into the book or something. But at the beginning of the book, what we follow is the main plot driver of the story, and that is the devil. You know, he's never called like that. He's called Woland, but he represents the devil, and he visits Moscow, where these two characters are roaming about. And his introduction into Moscow causes a lot of chaos and a lot of terror and misconceptions and things like that. And we follow these disparate characters, but not disparate, they all have like a certain bond to each other, but we follow a huge cast of characters who have certain things happen to them because of the arrival of the devil into Moscow. Now, certainly at the beginning you are thrown into it. You are introduced to three characters in the beginning. One of them dies, and the other one goes to a mental hospital, and like the next, you maybe follow one of these characters for 3 chapters, I think, and then you're introduced to a whole new characters. And so it really feels as if you're like thrown into the deep end. Now I like this kind of writing, so I like figuring out where I am as I go along, but I do have to say that you really are feeling like that until the very end of the novel. And even then, I mean, I did also have to really think what the story was about after having finished it. So I feel like there's a great chance of you either feeling like you're drowning in the story, or you being okay with being taken by the stream, taken with the current. That for me was the case, but I can definitely see it being otherwise. Also, it is a originally Russian novel, so the names of the characters, at least to me, are always super confusing. I'm always going back thinking, wait, which is this Ivan, because there are multiple Ivans, and which is this Nikonar, I cannot even remember the names now. And definitely in the epilogue I also had the feeling like you were introduced to all these characters very briefly, so it could feel like, who are we talking about here again? So there are very many opportunities to kind of get lost in the story. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. However, if you have had some experience with Russian literature, you like Russian literature, I would go for it. I absolutely loved reading this. I mean, yeah, I think I'm gonna change my Goodreads review and bump it up to a 4, because I really loved certain elements that are in it. The story is very much about the dark side of human nature as well. You know, you have the devil in there, but it's mostly shown that also shown that a lot of the evil or a lot of the darker sides to life are actually the result of human action. And then so there's also a very nice conclusion about the need for shadow in our life, how we cannot get rid of the devil, because what would our life be without shadow in it, and how would our world keep on turning without shadow elements to it, which I think is a very valid point, a very nice one. And then another big part of the book is about writing. So I always love reading about writing. I always love when a writer introduces the act of writing into their book. And so the story that the master is writing is actually introduced into the book on like three occasions, I think. And so it's very much a story within a story, which is an element to a book that I always very much like. The meaning of the story within the story, I have my own personal interpretation of why it's there and what it all means. I have no idea whether this is the real reason why this story is there or not, but as far as I'm aware, at least to me, it was not clear. I mean, you're not given, the writer does not take you by the hand and gives you conclusions, which in a way I like. I mean, I like it very much, but it can also be difficult. You know, in this case, you're really given very few guidance, which isn't nice, because in that way you can come to super disparate interpretations of the story, but of course as a reader it can sometimes feel as if you are making the story, but that is like, it's a valid point to think of. The reader makes a story just as much as the writer makes a story. I especially liked this book's reflection on writing, and this might be because I love the element of writing in books, and maybe other people read nothing in this about the act of writing, but I felt that especially in hindsight there's so much in there about the act of writing and writing as an act of creation. So yeah, I'm gonna bump it up to 4, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you are very much okay with being given very little guidance in the story, in being plunged into a story without knowing the meaning of it, in feeling like there is no meaning to it. Yeah, but if you're like interested in frame stories, stories within the stories, meta elements to a story, then I wouldn't recommend it to you. However, it can take a very long time for you to get there. I mean, the meta elements for me were only clear very late in the novel, and only then could I see that they were there way earlier already. But so, yeah, I'm giving it a 4-star. I'm happy with that decision. So, yeah, sticking to it. So I might decide to go on more detail on this book if I've had more time to think on it. Maybe if you're interested into my interpretation of the act of writing in this book, I can definitely think about making a video about that, or maybe just comment on it down below. If you've read this book, I would be super interested in hearing what your thoughts were on it. Did you like it? Did you hate it? What was your interpretation of the meaning of this book? I don't know very much about the Russian element to it. I know it's seen as a sort of as a commentary on Russian society of the time, but I don't know enough about Russian society to be able to pinpoint certain elements to it. I just gave it my own interpretation, and if you've done any more research into this, please let me know. I will definitely continue doing a little bit more research into this because I really enjoyed this read. So okay, that's it for the month of October. For the month of November, I have a slightly more ambitious TBR, not that much bigger, but still, it's slightly more ambitious, and I hope to be able to finish it the same way that I did this month. Also, my Goodreads challenge for this year is nice and on track, so I'm really looking forward to possibly actually finishing more books than I had on there for once. I mean, it's been 5 years or something since I had a higher Goodreads count than my Goodreads challenge. So thank you guys for inspiring me to read more and for making me stick to my schedule more. Of course, this is purely self-motivated, but still, it's nice to see this development. Okay, so I'll see you next time when I'll be presenting you with my November TBR. Bye!